This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
There is no greater evil than stealing the innocence of a child. Listen to this.
How do we measure the innocence of a child's life? Would we measure it by value, by usefulness, or by fragility? Or is it the case that innocence is inherent and cannot be measured? Maybe there is no gradation, no gray area, no middle ground. Perhaps innocence either exists or it does not. Every day that we are allowed to enjoy the freedoms and pleasure this country has to offer, a growing number of children are having their innocence ripped away.
Under the federal law, anyone who recruits, patronizes, solicits a minor under the age of 18 for the purposes of a commercial sex act can be found guilty of trafficking. Upwards of 80% of all confirmed sex trafficking cases involve U.S. citizens, and up to 40% of those cases involve the sale of children.
Unfortunately, to some of our fellow countrymen, destroying the human spirit in a child is a worthy sacrifice for a lucrative and flourishing business. However, this goes well beyond the sickening perversion of the flesh. There exists an occultic evil that has been awakened. These demonically fueled agents of sexual abomination regard the bright light of innocence as a trivial and inconvenient flame that must be snuffed out. We must not close our eyes from the sting of the smoke any longer. It is time we look upon the smoldering ashes of what used to be our children, become properly horrified, and finally decide to adopt within ourselves an insatiable motivation to expel this scourge from our land. It's time to stop ignoring the desperate cries of our children.
Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. That was a trailer of, obviously you didn't see the video portion of it, but it is the audio from the trailer for a new documentary film produced by a friend of ours who has surprised us, perhaps, or maybe not, but he has demonstrated that he has found his calling with a new documentary which touches on a dark subject, but it brings to the eye, to the table, a something that I think most people wish would just kind of go away, would like to pretend that it doesn't really exist, but there is no turning our eyes away from it. Once you know it exists, you cannot turn your back on it any longer, and that is our mission as Christians, as followers of Jesus Christ, to protect those among us who are the most helpless. And again, there are no more helpless among us. None are more helpless than the children whom we are called to protect. The film is called Silent Cry, The Darker Side of Trafficking, and it is our honor to welcome back to the program for the first time in far too long, Josh Peck. Josh, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Derek. It's good to be back. And yeah, it has been a while. We've all been pretty busy, though. I think the last time might have been for Day the Earth Stands Still.
I think so.
Yeah.
And that was a little more I wouldn't say lighthearted, but I mean, having shared some interesting experiences down in Roswell, we could laugh a little bit more. But yeah. I don't know that there's anything really in this subject that we can laugh about.
Right.
It is your first effort as a filmmaker, and I've got to say I am tremendously impressed with the level, because I have a little experience in in sitting in front of a monitor, knowing what it takes to edit video together. I'm feel good when I can make something that at least flows from one to another, but to do something and tell a story with video as almost as a painter with a canvas.
Right. Yeah.
Is really a gift.
That's something that I realized too, because yeah, like you said, this was the first time I've been doing video editing and things for years, but this is the first time that I really tried to put together a full feature length film. And you're exactly right. It did turn out to be more kind of in a way that I was surprised by, more like an art form rather than, like when we edit Skywatch TV episodes or something. There's usually a strict formula that we stick with to make sure everything, looks good and it's good for the networks. But with something like this, there's a little bit more freedom. And so the main thing that I really wanted to do was tell, I didn't want to just inundate everybody with a whole lot of facts that they could just go and look up on their own. I wanted to get into testimonies. I wanted to tell the stories of people who have survived these horrible abuses. Tell the stories of people who are working on the front lines to rescue children. I really wanted to deal with the emotional story behind it. So there is a lot of factual information, most of which is difficult to find elsewhere because they come from firsthand from the experts that I interviewed themselves right in the movie. But you get that, and then you also get the human element, the actual story. So I think I'm hoping when people watch it, they'll find something that, even if they don't know anybody that's been through this is something that they can connect to, have a heart for. And then, like you said, what my hope is that after they watch the movie, they're not going to be the same and they won't be able to turn their back to this issue anymore.
Yeah. Why did you tackle this particular topic as your first effort at producing a documentary film?
Yeah, it was strange because this, up until the time where, we at Skywatch decided, hey, let's try to do a movie, let's have Josh do it. And, I didn't really have a huge, driving interest in this topic. Not that I've always thought it was a good cause. I mean, here at Skywatch, our partner ministry is Whispering Ponies Ranch. And so we're all involved in that. And I've always thought it was a good cause, but it was difficult for me to really think about that at first. I wanted to pick a topic that I knew I could give my all into. I didn't want to do I wanted to do something that was going to change lives, hopefully. Now, UFOs, Nephilim, that kind of stuff, it's important and it's interesting, but I don't know how many lives are really changed based on that stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, at least for me, it's interesting and it's good to talk about. And, there are some really cool stuff with the Bible. And that's, up until recently, that's been primarily what I've focused on in researching. Part of me kind of coming to this topic started with my last book with Stephen Bancarz called Second Coming of the New Age. And in that we deal with how Satanism, occultism, New Age theology has crept into the church. But in part of researching for that, some of this stuff did come up with these occultic circles using children and buying children from traffickers, because a trafficker doesn't care who their customer base is. They don't care if somebody's buying a child for rape or for ritual abuse. They don't ask. So it doesn't come up. And some of that was coming up in my research for that book, which we didn't write about in that book because it was just kind of, it was too far out there for what that book encompassed. But it kind of planted the seed in my head where there's a real problem here and it hasn't been addressed. Usually when you see documentaries about child sex trafficking, it's really statistic driven, which is great. Everybody, we need to know the facts. But I've never seen one that deals with the occultic part of this. And it is more rare than just sex trafficking in itself. So we do deal with both sides of it. But that's actually where the subtitle comes from, darker side of trafficking. I've gotten the question before. What is there a lighter side?
Yeah, because exactly. It seems like this subject is pretty dark to begin with.
Right. And so that's a good point, and it's a fair question for people to ask. And the reason that we settled on the subtitle, the darker side of trafficking, is because there is a whole side to this that's ignored by the mainstream media. Mm-hmm. If the mainstream media deals with this topic at all.
Well, typically they try to poo-poo it and just say, well, this doesn't really exist. Oh, Pizzagate, you're one of those. You must be a QAnon follower. You're a conspiracy theory, and probably dangerous too.
Exactly. Yeah. The whole thing's become politicized. And so the mainstream media, if they deal with it at all, it's usually, like you said, or on some conservative news channels, they'll deal with the statistical stuff. But I haven't seen anybody cover in a real way, in a real balanced, non-sensational way, just factually based way, the occult stuff, where kids are getting sold to literal witches that are using them for satanic ritual abuse, child sacrifice, really horrific things. And I even for a while, I thought that a lot of that, well, that's just leftover satanic panic stuff. That none of that's just conspiracy theory. But through some of my friends, Russ Dizdar, David Heavener, Thomas Dunn, who did a movie Detestable, that deals with more of the satanic ritual abuse side of it and not as much with the trafficking. But again, these two things are connected. It was through listening to some of them just over the past few years and in private conversations and stuff where I really kind of realized that there is something to this, and there is evidence. It doesn't have to remain in the realm of conspiracy theory. The problem is a lot of times when these things get shared, it's like all or none. When somebody is going to share about child sex trafficking or satanic ritual abuse, they will share everything they find and not vet it. So they'll get a lot of misinformation, or they won't share any of it at all, and then nobody learns anything. So what I really tried to do with this film is to go back to your original question, why this topic, all of those things, looking back on it now, all of those things, talking to some of my friends for years, plus stuff that was coming up in research for me and Steve's book, it just all kind of culminated in at the perfect time towards this point about a year ago, where Tom Horn and I were talking about the possibility of doing a documentary and what we might want to talk about. One of the topics that was on the table was something about child sex trafficking. We talked about some other ideas too that we're actually going to be exploring in the years to come, Lord willing. And I'm excited about that. So there is definitely a future here, with more films, but, not specifically on this topic, but others. So we had a lot of ideas on the table, but the one that really stuck out and it just felt like a God thing, like this one really needs to be done now, was the child sex trafficking one. And so, Tom and I talked about it. We had a big meeting about it with a lot of the Skywatch staff, because we like to get everybody's input. And through just kind of tossing around some ideas, we decided broadly somebody needs to make a factual, evidence-based documentary on the occult side of child sex trafficking, the satanic ritual abuse stuff that's never talked about in mainstream media, but in a way that's not just sensational conspiracy theory. Well, we have to believe it because this guy says, but there's no real proof. So we started with the Finders case decades ago, because that was from what I could find, and I'm sure there were earlier cases, but in recent modern history, that was the first time where it was like it was this balance between conspiracy, sensational, occult stuff, but then actual child sex trafficking stuff that could be documented. And so we opened the film with that, with the whole Finders case, and it's all from legitimate government sources. And we cite every source. People can go online on the FBI's website right now and look up all of this stuff. Yeah, that was part of the big document dump that the FBI did earlier this year, which included all of that material, plus references to the McMaster, not the McMaster, the McMartin preschool case, which was one of the things that prompted the whole satanic panic backlash against the idea that children were being abused for ritual purposes. This is something that Sharon and I investigated and talked about quite a bit in the early days of PID Radio, which was our podcast that launched in 2005 that led to all of this, meeting Tom Horn, interviewing people like Mike Heiser, Stan Deo, L.A. Marzulli, and so forth. It kind of drew us into this whole orbit. But that was one of the things we looked into pretty consistently early on, and became friends with a gentleman named William H. Kennedy, who wrote the book Lucifer's Lodge about pedophilia inside the Roman Catholic Church, who was also connected to some investigations into what was going on back around 05 and 06. There was a young man by the name of Johnny Gosh who had disappeared, and he had apparently reappeared in a very bizarre way, showing up as a reporter for a gay-friendly news outlet in the White House as a part of the White House press corps. And people were asking him, wait a minute, how did he even get credentialed? And
he looks an awful lot like that kid who disappeared years ago. And so that turned out to be a big thing. Anyway, William Kennedy was part of the investigation into that. He has since passed, but because of that, and then the research connected to what he was looking into, we were drawn into looking at the McMartin preschool case, the Franklin Credit Union scandal in Omaha, Nebraska, where the owner of that was connected to some dark dealings, but somehow wound up getting invited to sing the national anthem at the Republican National Convention in 1988. And then, of course, the Finders. And the Finders is, as you say, it's one of the best documented cases and was absolutely shocking in how it got swept under the rug.
Yeah.
So what was it about that case that made you decide that this was something to open the film?
Yeah, and it's because it can all be verified, and it really shows the level of corruption. And I mean, the whole case, for those who aren't familiar, I can give kind of a brief rundown about what these government documents say about Finders, the case that wasn't previously released, because when the whole story broke, it was swept under the rug. Nobody really gave it a second thought. Seemed like there was something weird there, but even today, there's still a lot we don't know, because when you look through the documents, it's heavily redacted. But from what we can piece together, just based on what the documents actually say, we can show that there definitely was some kind of cover up here, possibly direct involvement with this. So we tell the whole story in the movie, and we can hit on some of the highlights here. So the police brought two men. Well, actually, let me back up a little bit.
This began in Tampa, Florida.
Yeah, let me back up, and I'll actually start with what the public was told, and then we can go in and I'll give some of the details what these documents showed. But the official story, what the public was told, was that the Finders was like a post-hippie commune of off-the-grid futurists. They were discovered in 1987 in Tallahassee, Florida, when a woman saw...
yes, Tallahassee, not Tampa. Sorry.
Yeah, when a woman saw 6 malnourished children, and these children were with 2 well-dressed men at a park. And so something didn't seem right. The woman called the police. And 2 weeks after that call was made, the whole case was dropped, largely forgotten. A lot of the details were not made public at the time. So it just seemed like one of these just weird kind of things. And that must have been okay, because nobody found anything. But the documents, until the documents were released, and that just happened recently, I think just like a year or 2 ago. And so now we can see that the official story was completely fabricated. I mean, there was definitely a cover up here. So, when the police brought these two, now what we can actually find out from the documents that were recently released, when the police brought the 2 men in and the children into custody, the men were uncooperative. They didn't provide ID for themselves or for the kids. They were unable to prove that the children even belonged to them. While they were in custody, it was discovered that there was another Finders case in Washington, D.C., so there was at least 2 of these groups.
And the Finders was the name of this organization that they belonged to.
Which came out later. At the time that they first brought these men in, they didn't know. So, they were looking for possible connections, and they found this case in Washington called the Finders, and then they found out that this was another case of that. So the police were kind of piecing together this whole story about this weird cult. They actually searched properties that belonged to the Finders, and they found hand-drawn pentagrams. They found over 100 animal bones. There was other undisclosed pieces of evidence of satanic cult rituals, and again, we can't see all of it because a lot of it's redacted. They also found cages where witnesses actually said that they were used to keep children in during their visits. So they had real witnesses that were attesting to this stuff. They discovered documents on the Finders property containing instructions for obtaining children, impregnating women, purchasing, kidnapping, and trading children. There was a member, and this is what I think is part of why there was a cover up, because a member of the Finders, and all we know is the first name, Isabella, was discovered to have worked for the U.S. government from 1950 to 1971. So it seems like what's going on here is either the government had invited the Finders in, or the Finders had somehow infiltrated the government. But it seems like there was some kind of cooperation there. There are investigators mentioned in the documents, though, a lot of names have been redacted, who became absolutely convinced the finders were part of an organized child abuse scheme. And there was actual child abuse that was found in these documents, really horrific stuff explicitly, and which we deal with in the movie. So we don't hold anything back in the film. We actually tell what was done to these children based on these actual medical reports. And this was discovered, all of the sexual abuse was discovered before the case was dropped. So they knew about it. Police questioned the children, and the two men at the park. The kids described seeing women walking around naked at their home. They described their leader, who was called the Game Caller. His real name was Marion Petty. And he would tell these kids to do strange things like read random bulletin boards and take notes and babysit children, just weird kind of cult behavior sort of stuff. But during the interview, the children were so malnourished and so sick and hungry that they actually urinated and defecated on the floor. So based on that, they were medically examined. Two of them, and we only have first names, Max and Mary, they were confirmed cases of sexual abuse. Like, no question about it. It was clear that they were both sexually abused.
There were marks on their bodies that suggested that they had been used.
Yeah. And they, and we detail that in the film too. I'll keep it kind of PG here, just as if people want to, we do actually go through all of the abuse in the film. So, it's horrific stuff. But so they knew about that. This was documented. We show the documents right on the screen so people can see the documents. But still, even after all that evidence, on February 18th, 2 weeks after the confirmation of sexual abuse was discovered, the entire case against the finders was dropped. No arrests were made. The two men had all charges against them dropped, and the children were even sent back with no attempts of rehabilitation or foster care. They were sent back. It says in the documents they were sent back with people who claimed to be their parents or guardians. So I don't know what claimed means or if they ID'd them. I mean, it doesn't say really specifically, but they were sent back to, apparently back to their abusive guardians. And there was a lot more with that too. So there was an affidavit written either on or after February 5th of 1987, which is a day or more after the child sex abuse was discovered, stating that the children were all examined for sexual abuse, but the results were not available at this time. But now that the documents have been released, we have clear evidence that an offense report was made at least a day earlier. So the results were available. And, some might say, well, that was years ago. Maybe they sent in for them and they just didn't get them sent back. But again, if we're talking about child sex abuse, they had phones. You couldn't make a phone call. The results were available. They had the findings right there. It was, it's confirmed in the documents, and still this whole thing was covered up. We don't know exactly the depth of it. There's a lot of speculation. There's even speculation from investigators in the documents. There was one unnamed investigator who said that he didn't believe that the cult ever disbanded, like ever, which they might still be operational today. He believed that they had infiltrated into the CIA, FBI, and other branches, other places in the government. Towards what end, he couldn't really say for sure, but he said it might be some kind of experiment. He gave like a different ideas on what it could be. But what I liked about what he wrote is he very clearly separated the facts from his speculation. And so we go through all that in the movie. So the best guess that we have are this investigator's speculation. We don't know who he was, but he was apparently somebody close to the case. Again, his name is redacted, so we don't know. So there's reason to believe this is still going on. So all this to say, the documents were recently released within the past year or two. Do we really think since
just last October?
Yeah, last October. Do we really think since that time that the government has cleaned up their act? Of course not. Of course not. If anything, it's likely to have gotten worse, and we see examples of that. We can look at the Epstein case, which we deal with that in the movie too. But the government has a standing interest in child sex trafficking. I don't know to what extent, just that they do, but it also tells us that we can't look to government to solve this problem. They're not going to. The government is too corrupt. There are some good people in government that are fighting against this, but the government just as a whole It's corrupt.
It's been infiltrated, and they've got people in very prominent positions of power to influence investigations like this. And again, just to summarize, the Finders case was quashed at the request of the CIA, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
I think the investigator was named Clement, if I remember correctly. The Tallahassee Democrat, which is a newspaper down there, ran a story on this just a couple of days after these documents were released. And they believe that this fellow, this investigator named Skip Clement, was the one whose name was redacted in the FBI files. But it was his belief that it was the CIA that reached out to Washington Metro Police and basically told them and the FBI, drop it.
Yeah.
And when you read through the documents, which I did when they were released, because again, this is something Sharon and I looked into quite a bit back in the day, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It's astonishing that you've got the police and it's pretty clear from the way the final report by the Metro Police investigator reads, and the customs department was also investigating this.
Yeah.
They were reading between the lines, furious.
Yeah.
Because you're right. There are good people in government and law enforcement who want to pursue this, but somebody at a level of authority that could not be challenged said, no, you're not going to pursue this any further. We've seen the similar things from other stories from other places around the world. There are cases in the UK, the infamous Marc Dutroux case in Belgium, which almost required a public revolution to get the government of Belgium to prosecute because of his connections to people inside high levels of government there. Yes, you're absolutely correct. I think that this is not something that we can depend on the government to fix, because there are too many within the government who have a vested interest in keeping it going.
Yeah, and I wanted to start with that in the movie, specifically to just kind of shatter this idea that some people have, and I used to have it too, that, I do believe America is the best country in the world. I really believe that, but that doesn't mean that it's without its problems and its faults and its corruption. And I used to have this idea that these kinds of things just would not happen in American government. We as the American people and our government is above all that. I kind of used to have a childish view of that. And I think some people still do. So I wanted to shatter that to begin with, because if you have that view, you're not going to listen to the rest of the movie. You're going to think it's all conspiracy. You're going to think that these people are just making it up, or they imagined, that they went through something, or they're just seeking attention or something. You're going to think all sorts of horrible things. So I wanted to show immediately, no, there is good reason to that we can know this stuff has happened before. It hasn't stopped because, again, that case was just thrown out, and in order for it to continue, they didn't throw it out so they could stop it. It's in order for it to continue, and that's one case. How many cases are there active for how long? And so that's what I really wanted to start the movie with, to show people, like, look, we can verify this actually does happen.
Yeah.
And it is happening today. And you have to think about it. At the time, 1987, this is pretty much pre-internet, pre-consumer cell phones and things. We live in a totally different world today where there's so much more connectivity. Imagine the level of corruption now compared to back then. So it's bad. And it's time that we all decide, okay, we're going to quit having this kind of childish view of our country, realize that human beings are corrupt and human beings are they are the government. They're the American people too. And there are bad people doing bad things, and we need to get the facts straight.
So where does it go from there? I mean, once we get, okay, we accept the idea, the premise, then that this goes on, and that there are cases where this type of activity is protected by powerful people. How prevalent is it, and what are some of the things that people might not imagine that takes place? What are some of the really disturbing facts about trafficking? Oh
yeah, it's terrible. And we immediately in the film, so it goes from the Finders to immediate modern day today, and we talk with several experts, but I wanted to, immediately shatter that kind of paradigm that America's, this kind of untouched place where this stuff doesn't happen. And then I wanted to show, okay, now that you've accepted this has happened in the past, what is it like today? How much worse has it gotten? America is actually ranked as one of the worst countries for human trafficking.
Wow.
And all of these facts that I'm about to say are verifiable. People can go online and you can, from actual government websites, you can verify all of these. We have Jaco Booyens in the film, and he is, if you don't know that name, look him up. He is phenomenal. He is one of the true champions of this fight. He's on the front lines every day, fighting to save these children. His sister, Alanka, was sex trafficked herself, as a child, and she's in the movie as well. And we put her whole story in there, and it's really impactful. But Jaco, he knows all these statistics, and I'm very, very careful. I made sure to verify everything that he said. It's all absolutely correct. There is nothing in the movie that people can't go and verify. So all of what I'm about to say is going to sound horrific, and it's going to sound like I'm exaggerating, but again, I'm not, and people can verify me. 1 out of 4 victims of trafficking are children. So 25% of trafficking victims in our country are children. 500,000 kids are being trafficked per day in America. That's not in total all the time. That's every single day. 500,000 kids are being trafficked per day. A child who is trafficked is raped on average 5 to 15 times per day. Per day. Yeah, and that's why they don't live long. And that came up in the statistics too. Only 1% of this crime, 1% of the crime of trafficking is ever reported. That's why we don't hear much about it, because it's not reported. Typically with these crimes, you have the victim, you have the abuser, and that's about it. Neither of, the victim isn't allowed to report the crime, and certainly the abuser isn't going to. So only 1% is ever reported. The average age of girls, now this part here kind of shocked me. Typically when we think of child sex trafficking, at least this was me, I thought of more like older teens, like 16, 17.
Right.
There's actually something that we have to factor in with these statistics, given that. So the average age of girls actively trafficked is 12 to 14 years, while boys is 15 years, which is a little younger than I thought, but actually it really would be younger than that. These numbers are a bit skewed because, they don't factor in the children who die from this crime.
Oh, wow.
So the average life expectancy of a child who is trafficked is only 7 years. And those deaths, so 7 years is the average, meaning half of the children who die in this are younger than 7.
Mm.
Those numbers aren't factored in to the, kids who are being actively trafficked today, because when they do those statistics, they count the ones who are still alive. So that's why those numbers are as old as, 12 to 15 years old. If everything was factored in, it would probably be closer to 8, 9, 10 years old on average of kids who are trafficked. It's gotten really bad. So this means that, again, the children who die are not counted in the average. I'm kind of repeating myself, but I really want this to sink in with people. They're not counted in the average of active trafficking, which makes the age appear older. 12 to 15 years is actually the high end of the age. So it's really horrific. So kids, they die by either just the violence of the trauma of the rape itself, which that's common. The drugs they're given. They die from suicide, even 7, 8 year olds, or they die alone in the street after they've been used and can't be used anymore. They're left to die in the street. So even with adults, much of what's called prostitution, so-called prostitution, it's not even prostitution. It's sex trafficking. Over 98% of global prostitutes, and this is adults, are not actually prostitutes by definition. They're trafficking victim, because for it to be prostitution, it has to be completely voluntary. Meaning if there's any force, if there's any fraud, any coercion, anything like that, if they're doing it to pay off debt or because their pimp is making them under threat, if there's anything that violates their free will, if they've ever been raped or abused, or if they're told they have to, pay off debt or anything like that, that's not prostitution, it's trafficking. So 98% of what is commonly called prostitutes today, they're not prostitutes at all. They're trafficking victims. So, and it's horrible too. Something that parents really, and I know these are like horrific things. We don't want to accept that this is true and this is happening in our country, but because of that kind of attitude, and believe me, I understand that attitude well. Because of that attitude, though, that so many Americans have, this problem has been allowed to fester beneath the surface and get as bad as it gets now. So, for parents, how are these kids, found by traffickers? Most assume that the majority of kids in sex trafficking got in there from a kidnapping, and that's not the case. That happens sometimes. Sometimes children are found through boys and girls clubs or even in church settings. That's actually frequent, unfortunately. Kidnapping, it does happen, but many times traffickers are more kind of clever in their approach to procuring children. Traffickers will use children to recruit other children. So sometimes this means sending them into foster care or into child protective services in order to find other kids the traffickers can target. You can literally have, and this happens, 9-year-olds recruiting other 9-year-olds. Sometimes children are sent into schools to recruit other students in public schools. We saw this in the case of Jeffrey Epstein. He and Ghislaine Maxwell, they would rape a child. They would give this child money and then tell the child to go to their school and find other children to bring over. Do you have any friends that would want to make some extra money too? Bring them over. So that kind of thing happens often. One of the most horrific things about this is a child can be trafficked without the parents even being aware of what's going on, which that sounds impossible, but it's because kidnapping does not always accompany a child sex trafficking scenario. A trafficker can pose as a young girl's older boyfriend and then start selling her, but the girl is allowed to return home as if nothing happened. Most times the parents aren't even aware the girl even has a boyfriend or anything like that is going on. Parents might just notice that the attitude of the child changes, but many times the parents see it as just a normal part of becoming a teenager. Sometimes it's that the girl has an older boyfriend that she doesn't tell the parents because either the boyfriend is threatening her, or most commonly the boyfriend will say, well, they wouldn't understand our love, and they don't understand you. I really love you. I'll take care of you. And they get groomed that way without the parents knowing it. That was one of the most horrifying things that came up in this, because I have kids of my own. The thought that parents have kids who are being trafficked and they're not even aware of it, that's horrifying. That is. And for you, it probably hits even closer to home than it does for me. Our daughter's 30 years old. So, but as the father of a young girl, obviously I thought I was alert as to what was going on, but I'm sure most parents whose kids are in that situation feel the same way. Right. You almost have to be, you're trying to balance between being protective and being a helicopter parent. You have to allow the kids to, experience life and get their bumps and bruises and learn that way. But on the other hand, and we learned this back in 2015 when we were early on in Skywatch TV. We had Opal Singleton out here, who's got a ministry called millionkids.org, which is a reference to the rough number of children who are being trafficked in total here in the United States. And she was telling us things about social media and how it's used by groomers to recruit and to find new victims that, I thought I was kind of savvy when it came to social media. Found out that, I don't know nothing when it comes to social media. She was telling me about apps that I'd never heard of. And that's continuing. I mean, it's almost daily now. New apps are being developed that kids are using. I mean, there's so many of them. I can't keep up with it either. No parent really can. I mean, most parents, they have to work. They got to provide for their families. A lot of them send their kids to public schools. And, I don't necessarily blame, I don't blame the parents, really. I mean, there are parents who are just flat out irresponsible and they don't care what happens to their kids. But I think that that's actually a small number of parents. Most parents want the best for their kids and they just don't know what to do because this problem isn't really discussed in the mainstream. Right. And things have changed so much from when, even when you were a kid, as you enjoy telling me, you were born the year that I began my radio career. 1984. But you're still old enough to remember a time before everybody had a smartphone or a tablet, allowing strangers into the children's bedroom at night when most parents aren't even thinking about that. Your parents, my parents, would never have allowed a stranger at the front door to say, hi, I'm here to see, Derek, and I could come into his room and play. Never happened. That's right. But by allowing these devices into our kids' rooms, it's going on all the time. Yeah. When I was a kid, the the advice to, it was don't go up to a car if they're offering you candy. It was just kind of simple things like that.
Right.
But today, I mean, back then, parents pretty much knew what the dangers were, knew how to handle it. Today, things are changing so fast. Right. And so now we have to shift our focus, and we talk about this more in the movie. We can get into it more later, mainly the movie is really where people are going to get this information. But we have to shift our focus, and it's not so much about learning the next app every single day. Like now you have to dedicate your lives to learning all this new technology and new ways that traffickers are going to. The way to get around all of that is to develop a really strong, trusting relationship between you and your kids.
Yeah.
And that can be hard, especially if they're teenagers. The best way to do it is to be totally honest, be honest about your own faults. That will go a long way with the child. That's something that I practice as well. My wife and I, Christina, we do that with our kids know, mom and dad are human beings and we are not perfect. Now, we have authority in the household, but that doesn't mean that we can't make a mistake. And we are really big on trust. So, if one of our kids lies to us, for example, we use that as an opportunity to teach them more about trust. Well, what's happened now is you've broken some trust with me and mom, and it's going to take you a while to build that trust back up. And so we teach them trust, but we also know that just because they're kids doesn't mean that you don't have to earn trust with them too. So if something, you want to have the best chance you can that if something odd happens with your kid, or if some older boy comes around, that your daughter will tell you about it, and it's going to be through that trust. And we lay out several ways to do that. In the film, it will minimize the risk of your child being targeted. There's hundreds of things that parents can do, but a lot of it builds around having humility, being humble.
Right.
Definitely, you got to have a Christ-centered home. It can't be, we just can't be doing this thing anymore where we go to church on Sunday and then don't ever talk about Jesus for the rest of the week.
Well, and I want to, in the last few minutes here, because I try to keep these to around 45 minutes if I can, but, let's bring that then to the realm of the occult, because as Paul wrote, we're not wrestling against human opponents, it's principalities and powers. So these traffickers, especially those who are engaging in a trade with those who are using these children for the occult, represent those who are doing this on behalf of their true masters, the demons, fallen angels, the spirits that are trying to destroy the next generation. How prevalent is trafficking for occult purposes? I
mean, it's definitely less prevalent than trafficking itself, because, just by nature of the way numbers and percentages works, it would have to be. It is. I don't even like using the word rare, because I think even a couple of cases is just that's common to me, but, there's no way to know the exact numbers on this, because there haven't been, just accurate studies done, because most people in the country don't even think it's happening. So they're not going to give it the time of day. It's really hard to know exact numbers, but I think it actually happens a lot more than, anybody would realize, myself included. And if I knew what the numbers were, I'd probably be surprised by it. And, the best we can do is just kind of get a general kind of feel from listening to testimonies. And there are so many children. We have experts. We have, I think 2 or 3. If you count all of the bonus products that come with the movie at skywatchtvstore.com, we have like 3 or 4 experts in satanic ritual abuse, just that specifically. And basically what that is, that's Satanists, occultists, whatever you want to call them, either buying children or stealing children. Usually nowadays they can procure them through traffickers, and they kind of cover their tracks with that. So they do that. But we have so many testimonies. Think about it this way. There's so many kids that are rescued from satanic ritual abuse. This is such a big problem that it keeps a large number of people employed. There are people that are rescuing kids out of this. There's private investigators. We have a couple of them in the bonus products and in the film. It keeps them having something to do. So it's at least that common. And this is speculative. I've heard, and I haven't been able to verify it, so I don't know for sure, but I've heard there are at least 1,000 people in the country who are working with kids and working to try to rescue kids from these circles. So if you think 1,000 people in the country are actively employed doing this is how they provide for themselves and their family, and this is the work that they do. How many kids can be helped in a lifetime? I figure maybe 1,000 per every 1,000. So I don't know the exact numbers, but it's more often than we think. And like you said, it is a spiritual battle. And that's the part of this that doesn't ever get covered, that I know of. And I've watched every documentary that I could find on child sex trafficking, because I wanted to see first, has the spiritual part ever been talked about? And the only thing that I could find about it was really sensational, unverifiable, like conspiracy stuff. And I'm not even saying that stuff isn't true. It's just, there's no way to know if it is.
Right.
Cause it's not based in anything, any kind of evidence. So, I really wanted to show how this is a spiritual problem. Like you said, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. So even these traffickers, while many of them probably don't believe in God at all. How could you? And then, just do that kind of thing and have any kind of conscience. Yeah. But, even if they don't know that they're being used by demons and fallen angels, it doesn't change the fact that they are. Just like the investigators in this Finders case, just because they don't know the secret cabal in the government that's pulling the strings, it doesn't mean that the strings weren't being pulled. So it's the same thing in the spirit realm. And that is where we take this fight. That is why, just the gospel, Jesus Christ, getting your kids Christ-centered, getting yourselves Christ-centered, making Christ the center of your home is of utmost importance in this fight. That is the best place to start, and that's the best thing to filter everything else you do through, is Jesus Christ. And so we talk about that in the film too.
Yeah. Unless you think this is being overblown. I mean, I just to see.
Yeah.
As we're sitting here talking, I just did a quick search on the web for children rescued. Just that phrase. 8.1 million results. When you click on the news tab at Google, as we're recording this on September the 23rd, Wednesday, this will go up on Sunday. Just yesterday, 35 missing children were rescued in Ohio during Operation Safety Net. 2 weeks ago, 72 missing children across 3 states rescued. 3 weeks ago, 39 missing children found in Georgia during Operation Not Forgotten. 3 weeks ago, 8 children rescued in North Carolina after a police officer there infiltrated a child porn chat group. 2 weeks ago, 8 more children in Indiana rescued through Operation Homecoming. Wow. And this is all just on the first page of this search.
And this is only the kids in that 1% that are rescued, because not everybody gets rescued, and definitely not every crime even gets reported. This is a fraction of 1% of the full problem. It's mind-blowing.
And I dare say that this is a little more important than whether or not Donald Trump was correct in laughing about Ali Velshi getting whacked in the knee with a rubber bullet during a protest. I mean, okay, all right, fine. I guess there's a place to discuss that, but rescuing children, how come that doesn't get the same kind of coverage on cable news at night? The latest tweet from the president.
Yeah, it's because, like everything else, it's become politicized, which that was the most infuriating part of this. This should be something both sides of the political aisle can get behind. It has become so politicized that we have one side that will, some people in one side that will deal with it. And on the right, you'll have some people that will deal with it. You got a lot that ignore it, and unfortunately, but you do have some really good people but typically they are on the right. On the left, you have a lot of people that ignore it. They say it's conspiracy theory, or they propagate it through the normalization of pedophilia in our culture. Cuties on Netflix is the most recent in a long line of examples, and those examples are going to continue. So it's being pushed through media, through entertainment. This whole normalization of pedophilia thing is a big part of this. But unfortunately, like everything else, it's become politicized. And I'm not saying that everyone on the left is in favor of this stuff, or everyone on the left, no time ever is anybody saying everyone in this particular group when we generalize and talk about a group. I think that's just a deflection. But, primarily when you look at the issue, there's only one side that's really fighting in this fight to stop it. But then you'll get articles like the New York Times has said that the push to cancel Cuties or get Cuties or removed from Netflix was like a right-wing conspiracy theory or something like that. Yeah. I mean, if you fight in this fight, you're going to get painted as a lunatic. That's just the days we live in. If you don't want to see 9-year-old girls dancing provocatively on your TV screen, you're going to be seen as not even just a prude anymore, but a conspiracy theorist wacko. That's the society that we're living in right now. In my presentation for the Defender conference that we just recently had, a virtual conference, I talked about how our society is split into two different cultures, and a lot of it, and I focused on the pedophilia normalization part of it. You have one culture that is really pushing for that and one culture that isn't, but we really are a people divided now. And it's because of that everything, even the rape of children, the abuse of children, even that has become politicized. And if you say that you are, against pedophilia, you'll be seen as heartless. Pedophiles can't help it. That's the excuse that they give. You'll be seen as heartless. You'll be seen as a right-wing nut. All sorts of names will be thrown at you. But unfortunately, that's the country that we live in. Wear them as badges of honor. Yes. The film is Silent Cry, The Darker Side of Trafficking, features Jakob Booyens, his sister Ilanka Deaton, David Heavener, Thomas Dunn, Joe Artis Horn, Stephen Bankhurst, Tom Horn, and of course, Josh Peck, the filmmaker. John Wells, the incomparable John B. Wells, is the narrator of this film. I know it's available through the Skywatch TV store, but you've also got it available now through Amazon. Yes. And I'm asking everybody, please, if you're watching, or if you're listening to this, go and review it on Amazon. You can find it on Amazon Prime for streaming. You can rent it or you can buy it. But even if you got the DVD and all the bonus materials through skywatchtvstore.com, you can still review it on Amazon. Movie reviews and product reviews are a little different. They will let you, they won't let you review a product unless you bought it, but they will let you review a movie if you haven't streamed it, but you've watched it, if you bought the DVD. So however you've watched it, if you watch the movie, please go to Amazon.com. You can just search for Silent Cry. You can search my name, Josh Peck, Silent Cry. I have a link on my Facebook page if you follow me on Facebook, but please leave a review. It's incredibly important because the more good reviews that the movie gets, the more we can convince Amazon to put this movie in their new releases, to start suggesting it to their viewers. And it's not about any kind of fame or anything like that. It's getting this message out to as many people as possible. And, we have a very eye-catching cover. So, I mean, if somebody sees it, they're going to click on it and see what it's all about. And the main thing is we want to get this message out. I want to mention too, 100% of the profits of this movie, anything we sell, DVD streams, whatever, 100% of the profits go to Whispering Ponies Ranch, which is a safe haven for children who have been rescued from, sex trafficking to heal and to, learn about Jesus and to really begin their new lives outside of sex abuse. So all profits go to Whispering Ponies Ranch. That's important to mention too. But yes, please leave a review. Well, check the show notes because you'll find a link not only to where you can get this from the Skywatch TV store, but also at Amazon, also to Josh's website and his video network, dailyrenegade.com. We'll put that there. I'm also going to include links to the article from the Tallahassee Democrat and some other links to articles regarding the Finders case, previous interviews that I've done here on the Franklin scandal, the Johnny Gosch case, William H. Kennedy. You'll get a whole list of links. So do check the show notes below this particular program because more than with most programs, you'll find a lot of useful information that confirms what we've been talking about here in the notes. Josh, this is well done, much needed, and look forward to seeing what you come out with next. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Take advantage of the show notes at vftb.net or wherever you're listening to this podcast because there are a number of important links, not just to Silent Cry and to Josh's website and to Josh's new alternative Christian video channel, Daily Renegade, but to a number of interviews at A View from the Bunker that I've done over the years, going back to 2009 and some of this information going back even further, back to our PID radio days. We've covered the Franklin Credit Union scandal, the Finders, of course, that Josh and I discussed at the beginning of the interview, pedophile priests with William H. Kennedy, grooming
by predators with Opal Singleton of millionkids.org. All of those links will be in the notes. So you can take advantage of that. I've also got a link to the FBI files released last October on the Finders case, which is disturbing in and of itself. When you go through that information, as Josh discussed, and you see how much was compiled by FBI investigators, the Customs Bureau, police in Tallahassee, and Washington Metro Police, only to be shut down by the U.S. State Department. The federal government basically stepping in and saying, you will drop this case. It is really astonishing. And then think about it for a moment. What are the odds that that was the only time that this has ever happened? Not likely. So you'll find those links at vftb.net or wherever else you're accessing this podcast tonight. And I appreciate you educating yourself on this subject. And that is why, by the way, we moved to the Ozarks more than 5 years ago to partner with Tom and Nita Horn in the ministry at Whispering Ponies Ranch. And so I'll make sure I include a link to that website as well, and that worthwhile ministry, whisperingponiesranch.com. Coming up, a couple of new conferences to tell you about. And we're looking into 2021 already. That and more as A View from the Bunker continues straight ahead.
A child who is trafficked is sexually abused on average 5 to 15 times a day, and only 1% of these crimes are ever reported. This unimaginable darkness must be stopped. And right now, we want to invite you to join us in the fight to end child sex trafficking. Skywatch TV is proud to announce the Silent Cry Help the Children package. When you order the groundbreaking new feature documentary movie Silent Cry from film visionary Josh Peck, you'll learn firsthand from the world's most renowned experts in the fields of trafficking, pedophilia, and Satanism how Hollywood elites are actively engaged in the sexual exploitation of children, why the mainstream media and culture are attempting to normalize pedophilia, why we can't depend on the government to eradicate this ever-present evil, and what the risks are to you, your family members, and communities. Plus, the lead authorities from the Silent Cry movie are back in the never-before-released Covert Investigation on DVD, featuring pivotal, never-before-seen commentaries that couldn't be included in the original Silent Cry film. From cases of demonic possession to satanic perversion, experts on the front lines discuss the worst crimes fathomable being committed against the most innocent amongst us. You'll also receive the brand new MP3 audio series on CD, Occult of Perversion. In this explosive series, experts like Russ Dizdar, William Ramsey, and others share extremely sensitive research into the most perverse evils plaguing our country now, proving through over 12 hours of content that believers must combat this spiritual malevolence for the sake of our children. This incredible package also includes the never-before-released DVD Fake News or Hidden Truths. Join investigative researcher Stephen Bancars as he guides you through the most current research into the Pizzagate scandal. Is it all conspiracy? Who is involved? How does it pertain to events unfolding right now? Stephen shares explosive new revelations on the subject that have come to light since Pizzagate first broke and haven't been revealed to the public until now. Finally, the paradigm-shattering audio series by Dr. Thomas Horn himself, The Hidden Occultism of Epstein's Orgy Island. What demonic atrocities were going on at Epstein Island, and who were the high-powered individuals involved in some of the darkest occultic activities the world has ever witnessed. The contents of this mind-boggling 3-part exclusive MP3 audio series comes directly from the private vault of Dr. Thomas Horn. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of $135. Yours now for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling while supplies last. An excess of 500,000 children are being trafficked every single day in our country alone. Now is the time to take action. 100% of the profits from your donation for the Silent Cry Help the Children package goes directly to Whispering Ponies Ranch, a safe haven where children who have been abused in unimaginable ways can find rehabilitation and healing in Jesus Christ. The Silent Cry Help the Children package, available now at skywatchtvstore.com. Order now or call 1-844-750-4985.
Talking the walk every Sunday night from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online, vftb.net. Our free mobile app is the best, easiest way to keep up with us. It's a free app for Android and iOS devices, and I've got links to the app stores directly to the app at vftb.net. On social media, at View from Bunker. This is Twitter, of course, at View from Bunker, or my personal Twitter feed at Derek Gilbert. That's probably the one I use the most, although I try to cross-post everything to parler.com, Parler.com. It's a little friendlier to conservative voices, so if Twitter ever shuts us out, Facebook shuts us out, hopefully Parler will continue. You'll find us there, Derek P. Gilbert. On YouTube as well, my YouTube handle is Derek Gilbert. Couple of conferences to tell you about that are new that we have not been discussing. This weekend, of course, was the Hear the Watchman Igniting the Fire virtual conference, launched at 2 p.m. Eastern Friday. As you're hearing this, it goes to the web, released to the web at 7 p.m. Central Time, which means you'd have about 4 more hours to take advantage of the Igniting the Fire conference, if you're so inclined. It's a great deal. It's $49 as of now because it is late in the game. The early bird discount has gone away, but you can still save 20% and get 2 conferences worth of video presentations for the price of 1. So you'll get all of the video recorded specifically for this virtual conference, plus all of the video presentations that were recorded on site at the last in-person conference so far this year. That's the Hear the Watchman conference in Dallas, recorded back in March. So you get all of those presentations, plus the recorded presentations for this weekend, and save 20% with the promo code Gilbert20, Gilbert20, but that is only good until tonight. That is 11 p.m. tonight, Central Time, Sunday, September 27th. Now, we've got another Hear the Watchman conference coming up. That is November 5th through the 8th. This one will be in person at the Hilton Orange County in Irvine, California, right across from the airport there. The Hilton says that it's a go. Now, if we have to social distance by holding it outdoors, Mike says we will do that. Mike Kerr, that is. Mike Kerr, Jeannie Moore, the coordinators for Hear the Watchman. But speakers lined up for that conference: L.A. Marzulli, Bill Salas, Pastor Paul Begley, Gonz, Shimura, David Hebner, Michael Boldea, Jamie Walden, Joni Stahl, and then, of course, Sharon and I will be there. Again, that's at the Hilton Irvine. So we are coming to California November 5th through the 8th, just 3 days after the presidential election. I have a strong hunch that we are not even going to know officially who the president is by November 5th. Okay. Elections on a Tuesday. We'll be arriving in Irvine, California on that Thursday. So that could be a really, really interesting time to be holding a Christian conference in California, but we will be there, and we appreciate your prayers. If you want to find out more, if you're in California and you're looking forward to gathering with the remnant, join us at the Hilton Irvine in Orange County, November 5th through 8th. More information and registration online at hearthewatchman.com, hearthewatchman.com, the website. And again, you can save 20% by using promo code Gilbert20, Gilbert20. Now, Prophecy Watchers has rolled out its virtual conference. This is taking the place of the conference they had hoped to have in Colorado Springs at the end of October. The Marriott there just couldn't do it, could not accommodate the crowd, social distancing. So it's a virtual conference, but a little different. They're going to roll out presentations every day for 40 days, more than 50 presentations over the span of 40 days between October 1st and November 9th. Gary Stearman, Tom Horn, Rabbi Jonathan Kahn, Bill Salas, L.A. Marzulli, Dr. Tommy Ice, Pastor Billy Crone, Brent Miller Jr., Dr. Randall Price. Did I say him? Well, he's worth saying twice. Ken Johnson, Carl Tykrib, Dr. Michael Lake, Joel Richardson, Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis. It's going to be a great gathering. Sharon and I have already turned in our presentations, so you'll see us there as part of this group as well. Again, at least one presentation every single day throughout the month of October, October 1st through November 9th. You can sign up online at prophecywatchers.com. Now, into 2021, a small gathering. This will be at Global Fire Ministries in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We'll be in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, March 4th through 7th of 2021. Jeff Jansen is the pastor there, the head of the ministry, I guess I should say. And he has invited Sharon and me and L.A. Marzulli to basically teach at his church there that weekend. It's the Decoding the Supernatural Conference, March 4th through 7th, 2021. Right now, you just find a little more online. Don't have information as far as registration goes, but the website for the ministry is globalfireministries.com, globalfireministries.com. And June of next year, Prophecy Watchers has already announced its 2021 conference, Future Vision 2021, June 17th through 20th. This will be at the Colorado Springs Marriott. We pray that we'll be traveling by next June. And so far, confirmed speakers for this conference include Gary Stearman, L.A. Marzulli. They've got Tom Horn on the list. Tom keeps saying, this is my last conference, but they've got him listed, so we'll see. Tim Alberino, Bill Salas, Tommy Ice, Billy Crone, Carl Tykrib, Jeff Kinley, Michael Lake, Nathan Jones, Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis, Ryan Pitterson, Ken Johnson. So a wonderful gathering, and Sharon and I have agreed to be there as well. You can get more information and register now for the Future Vision 2021 conference at prophecywatchers.com. And of course, the Skywatch TV tour of Israel is on. We're looking forward to that in April of next year. You'll find out more and can reserve your place at skywatchinisrael.com. That's skywatchinisrael.com. We're keeping real busy lately. Sharon and I have just turned in the manuscript for our forthcoming book called Giants, Gods, and Dragons. That will be out in November from Defender Publishing. The first program on Skywatch TV about that will air the first week in November. We're scheduled for 3 weeks of programs on this book. This is drawing on research that we've been doing for the Unraveling Revelation series at Skywatch TV. Basically applying divine counsel concepts to end times prophecy, identifying the riders of the apocalypse, identifying the creatures that come out of the abyss in Revelation 9, identifying the dragons of the last days. And yeah, I know the beast that comes out of the sea in Revelation 13 has got body of a leopard, head like a lion, feet like a bear. Did you know that that's how lions were depicted in the ancient world? Dragons, rather. That's how dragons were depicted in ancient Mesopotamia. In fact, the way it's described, it looks a lot like the depiction of a creature called the Mushkushku. And I know I mispronounced it, but that's as close as I can get, which was the sacred animal of Marduk, the chief god of Babylon. So, in fact, there's a picture of it in my presentation for the upcoming Prophecy Watchers conference. So, it's not a coincidence that John, I think, was led to describe that creature as the beast representing the Antichrist. Anyway, that's what the book is roughly about, showing the giants, the gods, the dragons, in other words, the real supernatural enemy that we face in the end times. And that will be out in November. But because of other things that are going on, we're getting close to moving into the new studio at Skywatch TV. Yours truly had to produce the video trailer for the book, which is something I don't normally do. That is not really a central part of my skill set. Did it because I had to. It turned out okay, I guess, but it's not this is not the creative outlet that I enjoy. My creative outlet is writing or talking, actually putting together the video to make it really look slick and cool. That's other people's gifts, not mine. So anyway, that's why we missed last week's program. Was busy working on that and getting the book finished up, the final edits. Also working on re-editing an old novel of mine that we are republishing between now and Christmas. So that has been tying me up as well lately. So at this point, I'm hoping to get back to a weekly schedule, but I make no promises just because there's a lot of other things going on and only so many hours in the week. So I appreciate your patience and your understanding. We are online at a number of different places: Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify. We're in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and now also Amazon Music. Amazon Music is now carrying podcasts, and you can find A View from the Bunker there. And we appreciate it when you do find us at one of these locations, leaving us a review and giving us a like if you happen to stop by the View from the Bunker page at Facebook. And remember, A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Our announcer is DC Good. We do this because we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.